So this is the third in a series of videos about how you can present with real impact. We know what you're going to do in the first 30 seconds of your talk to grab your audience's attention, establish the relevance of your message to them and your credibility as a speaker. We know how you're going to establish a connection with this group. Easier said than done, but some concrete strategies now for creating a connection that means you're able to engage at a much deeper level than you might otherwise engage. And this week, I'm going to think about how you can convey real authority and passion in what you say. Now, don't misunderstand me. A lot of people, when I say, I want you to be authoritative, I can't say that, authoritative, that's the word. They think that sounds kind of intimidating. That's not me. I'm not an authoritative person. I'm much more kind of relaxed, laid back, friendly, open. Great. Let's convey that. And you can convey all of those things whilst also conveying authority. And what I mean here is the authority with which you present this message, which is, as a researcher, typically the evidence that you stand on. How concrete is that? How sure are you? And yeah, let's be sure about the evidence that we are basing our talk on. But if you are convinced that you've got a message which is worthy of being listened to and acted upon, then you need to not just speak words of authority and present the evidence. You need to convey that authority in a very real way. As we were talking about last week, people will listen to how you convey that as much as the words that come out of your mouth. And if there is a mismatch, then potentially you undermine your authority on that subject. But we'll have a think about some other things that you can do to make this very concrete. The second thing then is passion, and I think, again, very misunderstood. So is this now that I'm raving about this and I'm super enthusiastic and I'm a little bit embarrassing? Or is it that, you know what, this thing really bugs me and I'm really angry about this? And for me, this is about conveying positive emotion in what we say, to make it clear that yeah, I care about this. So I've got authority, and I am basing this on the evidence. And this is something that I care deeply enough to spend the time to come here and talk to you, to put in the effort to convey this in a way that shows I'm serious about this, and you too should be serious about this and think about this, rather than I am dispassionate, disinterested, and you know what, I'm beginning to feel a bit disinterested and bored by this as well. Yeah. So authoritative and passionate, that's our goal here. Now, for me, there are things that we can do with our feet and our hands that help to convey all of this. Now, let's build first of all on what we did last week, because we began to think a little bit about body language and the ways in which you can create a consonant message, which is a message which is consonant with your body language. And the first thing I'm going to suggest is that you need to be aware of what your hands are doing. So we're not looking for jazz hands, which kind of says, yay, I'm kind of fun and not very serious, and I'm kind of waving around in the wind here with my message. And I want to avoid anything which is too wild, and I'm just constantly doing things with my hands, and it's just really quite, I don't know, distracting, if I'm honest. And there's a nervous energy there, which suggests, this guy's nervous. Why is he nervous? Is he lacking in confidence because actually he's not sure what he's saying? Is he trying to cover something up? And at the same time, I'm trying to avoid things which look really nervous. So I'm trying to make sure that I've got relaxed body language, and I'm not just constantly doing things with my hand that shows, oh my goodness, maybe I'm going to get found out because this is not something I entirely believe in. Or I've got my hands in my pockets, or behind my back, or in some other way, kind of hiding my hands. Perhaps there's something else I'm trying to hide. So your hands convey your confidence, your authority, and they can also help you to convey your passion. But we're trying to do this in a way that does not undermine our message. So for me, the starting point is to say, well, I'm going to have a solid starting point, which is when I start any presentation, I'm going to come in with my hands open, and I have a home position for my hand, which is just right here in front of me, in front of my chest. And this now conveys that, yeah, I'm not nervous, I'm solid, I'm not distracting you. But every now and then, when I'm trying to make a point, I will then use a hand gesture, and it comes back to the centre. And whatever hand gestures I use are in a kind of a TV screen box. So I imagine that I'm on TV, I imagine that I'm kind of cut off from around here. And that's why I'm starting with them here rather than kind of towards my groin. And whatever hand movements are restricted within that box. I'm not kind of wide out, and I'm not going down, because what I'm now doing is I'm keeping everyone's attention on me. And those hand gestures are bringing people back to my eyes, my eye contact, my message, my mouth. Remember, you're listening to me. You're not looking at where my hands are now pointing over here or over there. So we're bringing attention back to ourselves rather than constantly distracting and taking it away. And yeah, we're here in that solid position, conveying I'm solid, I stand rock solid with my hands as well as everything else. Of course, you can think about other hand gestures, and I will think sometimes about a hand gesture on purpose, and I'll write it into my notes. For example, in my training, a recent addition to what I do is I tell people, look, go away with the tools that I'm going to give you here today. These tools will enable you to do something that is way better than you could otherwise do, way quicker. And tell your friends, tell your colleagues, because these tools, they travel, they translate. But my plea is, in the other hand, you take with you the beating heart of the impact agenda, which is relationships and trust. And as I say, beating heart, I beat my hand like a heart. And I'm trying now to really convey that message that, yeah, you might have some great tools, but there is a deeper message that goes along with these tools, and they have to stay together. So you're thinking about those together type movements or other metaphorical movements you might do with your hands that might convey your message. And you're doing this on purpose. The second thing then is to think about your feet. And I think most people are aware of their hands to some extent, but our feet, that's not something that we tend to think about. And this is one of the things that the person who gave me voice coaching told me that we really need to pay attention to. And so she said, well, she got us to actually do a presentation. It was quite embarrassing. And then she analysed our body language, and in particular, she analysed what we were doing with our feet. And the first thing was that she identified me as a swayer. So I'm talking and I'm kind of going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And this is kind of a slight nervous tension that is clearly coming out in the fact that I'm swaying backwards and forwards, because I don't normally do this. This is abnormal behaviour. And I'm kind of beginning to feel a bit queasy now as an audience member. And again, there's a sense of, yeah, I'm getting tossed and pushed from side to side by the waves of public opinion or whatever else. Am I really solid or not? Maybe not. There were those of us who were pacers, and so we would walk from side to side, and as we're talking every now and then we would say, look at the audience, but it's beginning to get a little bit distracting. And again, there's this sense that I'm not really speaking to you. I'm kind of in a reverie of my own, because I'm constantly looking at where I'm going and where I'm going to turn, and yeah, I just distract people. I'm going across my slides. Yeah, why am I doing this? It's not helping. That's the point. And then most embarrassingly, there were the dancers among us, and it was kind of dancer / needing to go to the toilet. So these people are kind of like twisting themselves up, and they're twisting their legs together, crossing their legs, and kind of dancing, kind of just, yeah, I'm a bit kind of animated here, and there's this real sense of, yeah, I'm not serious, and loads of nervous energy that is just kind of coming out in my little dance that I do to myself while I'm talking. And hopefully you can see, yeah, this is not the message I'm trying to convey here. I'm trying to convey, I am solid, I am rock solid, and the foundations I stand on with this evidence are firm. So here I am now, and I'm standing in my home position. And I'm asking myself right at the beginning, what does this stage look like? What does the front of this room look like? And where am I going to stand to do my 30-second intro, or however long it takes? And for me, that's usually right in the middle of the room, before there's lots of things up on any slides. And I'm standing right there in the middle, where both sides of the room can see me. And I'm saying, this is my purpose. This is what you're going to get from this if you engage with me. And this is why it's important. And I will then go to various other parts of the room. I'll come on to that. But right at the end then, I come back to that home position. And you remember when I stood here right at the beginning? I told you were going to get this, this, and this. And this now is exactly how this works and why you've now got this and how you can use this and what you might think about doing next. And there's a sense of completion, of coherence, that, we came full circle and I got that. And I'm quite excited about that now. And great, brilliant. So I am going to move around, but I'm going to move to 2 stations. And it goes for one on one side of the stage and one on the other side of the stage. And I'm doing this now because I'm going to make sure that everyone on this side of the room feels absolutely included. That this is for you as much as it is for those guys over there. Brilliant. And I'm going to do this also to emphasise that I've got different points. So my first point is this point over here. Now my second point, I'm now changing my slide and I'm now moving to the other side of the room. And this now is my second point. And there's this clear differentiation. Point 1, okay, what was that? Okay, I've got that. Now we're moving on, we're on point 2 now, okay, right. And now you guys on this side of the room feel just as included and engaged and you're not feeling left out. Fantastic. And then at the end, back to that home position. And in each case, I am planted firmly on the ground, my feet slightly apart, my legs perhaps slightly bent, but there is this sense of, I'm standing still, I am rock solid, and my message is rock solid. That's the subliminal message that you're trying to convey to your audience. Now, finally, and I'm going to finish with my story this week. Finally, I want to think about your intonation. And I think that this can really count as well. So we're thinking about how we go up and down, and we're making sure that we're not talking in a monotone. Now, I'm not great at this, and you've probably already noticed I've done this in a slightly monotonal way. But ask yourself how you use your intonation, and if you are going to go up or down at a certain point, when might you do this? So I'm doing that on purpose, and I'm trying now to keep that sense of interest going. I'm also thinking about my pace. So I might be hurrying through some content because, this is quite basic, this is quite simple, but just to make sure you're all caught up with me, we're just going to work through this. But now here is the nut. This is where you really need to understand. This is the new stuff. And I'm slowing down to make it clear you should not miss this point. You might think you know everything, and you might have just kind of glossed over that last bit. But this is the point that you need to pay attention to. And for me, there will be certain points where I might have memorized a phrase because this is my take-home message. And for that memorized phrase, I'm looking everyone in the eye across my audience, making sure no one is left out. I'm remembering there are people in that back row or in that balcony. And I am spelling out my take-home message. So you cannot miss this. Brilliant. I might use volume. Now, this, for me, is something that you need to use very sparingly, but it may be that, this is that still small voice that is telling you that you might be wrong. And I'm asking you to ask that question. Actually, what assumptions have I made? And I'm now using this to convey that, this is a personal thing. You can still hear me audibly, I'm mic'd up, but this is something personal. It's that still small voice. Or, we have to do something about this. We have to. And I'm emphasizing that with my volume. But of course, for me, you really need to use this sparingly, because this is when it can now start to sound a bit fake, a bit kind of overworked, and yeah, we want this to be authentic. I'll come on to that with my final take-home message. We also may want to pause or have a silence before something we say. And there are two ways in which I think this is really important. And I think the most important thing about silence is that we value silence. And we don't just fill up the silences with arms and ums. And this is my disaster. I really bug myself with this. And I notice it when I'm underprepared or when I'm tired, that I just keep filling in the gaps. Yeah, I'm thinking, and I'm adding an to show everyone that I'm thinking, and that means that I'm not really sure what I'm about to say next. And there's a sense that when I'm not really that sure about what I'm trying to say here, that I do know what I'm saying, but it feels like I'm not really that sure, and I've undermined my message again. And if I could just convert those and ums into silences, there'd be this sense of solidity, of assurance, that, you know, I'm so sure of what I'm saying that I'm willing to wait for 1 or 2 seconds. It might feel uncomfortable, but you know what? I don't feel uncomfortable because Mark doesn't look uncomfortable. He's waiting. And maybe he's waiting because he wants me to think about this. And now, as I move from point to point, there is a little gap. As I walk from one side of the stage to the other, as I collect my thoughts, and the audience has this pause, this breath, to think, yeah, what does this mean for me? And maybe I've left a question hanging to get them to think, what does this mean to me? Fantastic. So just try this out, record yourself, analyse your verbal tics, whatever they are. I'm an and an person. And then try on purpose to record a clean segment of 1 minute where you take those out and you replace them with space, with silence, and just see how different it looks. And it is remarkable, really remarkable what a difference that makes. But the other approach you can take here is kind of the dramatic effect pause. So I want you to think, and I want you to think about that, or whatever it is. And for me, quite often it will be before my take-home message. So I'm going to sum up this entire book, this entire talk in a single word. And that word is empathy. I've paused now before. A single word, what could that be? Interesting. Whatever I was thinking about, I'm collecting my thoughts. What is this going to be? And that single word is micropause, empathy. And we just add emphasis to our point, but we do it very subtly. Now, the final point that I want to make before I close with a short story is that we need to be authentic. And I think that the biggest objection people have to all of this stuff, the stuff I was talking about last week and this week, is that when I think too hard about what I'm doing with my hands or my feet or how I speak, I'm no longer being authentic. I'm no longer being me. I'm being this kind of fake person who's learned a bunch of tools and tricks and tips. And what I would ask you to ask yourself is, well, do you speak the same way to your students when you're lecturing, or to a bunch of academics, to the way that you speak when you're at home with your family, for example? And I think for most of us, I hope the answer is that it's very different. So my kids caught me recently, and we were on holiday. A friend had come to visit us for a couple of days, and they started asking about my work. And I started answering, and I gave the usual bland answers. And it turned out that they actually owned a bit of land that was affected by some of my work. So they asked for some really detailed information. And so I started giving it. And I realised, well, I didn't realise, in fact, my kids realised that this was a bit weird. Dad, what are you doing? You're acting a bit weird. This is your work person or something, but this is not Dad. I'd started using hand gestures. I'd started considering what I said. I was using my intonation. And this is how you do this. And this is why it's important. And And yet I've gone into my work mode, and I have a more English accent when I'm at work to be understood, compared to speaking Doric in a very Scottish accent at home where I live in Scotland. And the kids were instantly, yeah, this is weird, what's going on, Dad? And you just slip into these personas, and they are real. I am a dad, and I'm a professor, and I act in slightly different ways to be understood and to engender different forms of empathy in those different settings, and that's just fine, that's normal. So let's make sure that we are ourselves, and yet we are thinking. We're thinking carefully about how we do all of this stuff. I'm going to close with a short story now. I said each week with these 5 episodes I would give you a bit of a sense of what this might look like in practice, but also how not to do it. And this is a story of really how not to do it. And this is, again, an early career researcher story for me when I was not that far out of my PhD, still learning the ropes, before I'd got my voice coach training, sadly. And it was a high-profile event. It was a mixture of kind of 50-50 academics, policymakers, and on the front row were my funders. High pressure. I'm standing behind a little desk with the other speakers, and it's my turn to talk, and my heart is absolutely thumping. Oh my goodness, I've got to do this. And I practiced, I rehearsed, I felt like I could do this, but I was still properly nervous. This was one of the highest profile audiences that I'd ever spoken to. And looking back on it, I was happy because I got to the end and I did it pretty much on time. I got through all my slides, and that was the bar that I was putting it at, that I actually managed to not fluff my lines and get anything wrong, and I get through all my slides in the time. So I felt pleased with what I'd done. The reality was that there were arms and arms all the way through this. I stood there solid, but in this kind of pose of terrified fear as I spoke the whole time. And there was a very strong sense of rabbit in the headlights. I'm dazzled by this audience, and oh my goodness, I am trying my best to make this work, and I'm getting through this, but I'm not enjoying this at all. And you know what, as a result, you're probably not enjoying this, and you're probably starting to feel quite sorry for me. And you may be getting so distracted by that you're no longer listening to what I'm saying. And so I was happy. I got to the end, relief. And I think perhaps it was just that overwhelming sense of, I've done it, that meant that I was now no longer on my guard. And the questions then went catastrophically wrong. So I knew that there was one person I had to connect with. Somewhere, someone in that audience was the head of the Commission for Rural Communities. And that phrase is important, Commission for Rural Communities. I had to connect with him because he was writing out a report which could in theory be quite influential. Our work was highly relevant to that report, and I wanted to make sure that he knew about our work. And who should stand up to ask the very first question but this guy? And he introduced himself and he said, I am the head of the Commission for Rural Communities. Great, this is exactly who I wanted to get our message, fantastic. So remember what he looks like, he's wearing a red tie. I'm memorising now what he looks like. And whether it was that process or whether it was just complete fear, I have no idea what was going on, but he asked the most ridiculously simple question. And this was a gift to me. He said, what is the relevance of your work to rural communities? And I looked around my mind and there was nothing there. I mean, zero, nothing. I knew that I had to connect with him, but I hadn't actually prepared what I was going to say to him. Because I thought it would just be obvious, because our work is so relevant. And now I'm asking myself, what is the answer? I have no idea. And the silence kind of extended out, and at this point now, this was a properly awkward silence. And still nothing. I'm now beginning to go into panic mode. There's got to be an answer to this. I've got to say something. I just need to open my mouth and say something. But what is even the first word that comes out of my mouth? I'm not even sure. And then the chair intervenes. And this is Sir Howard Newby, head of the Higher Education Funding Council for England, who's ultimately funding my funders to fund me. And Sir Howard simply asks the question, or makes the comment, Mark, I think this question is for you. And to my absolute shame and horror, all I could say was 2 words, I know. That was it. Nothing else came out of my mouth. And I died there in front of all of these people. Now, luckily, my colleague to the right of me stepped in at that point and said, well, I know Mark's work quite well, and I think what Mark was trying to say was this. And I just nodded vigorously as I tried to disappear from view. And for me, this was not the pinnacle of my career by any means. This was not something that did my reputation any good whatsoever. I recovered from it, clearly. But for me, there was this deep dissonance all the way through, that I was terrified. And I had not given any thought to my body language because all my focus was simply on getting the words out of my mouth and getting to the end of my presentation. And as a result of that, I created something which created cognitive dissonance between what I was saying and, in theory, the solid evidence that we had, and this sense of absolute terror that, well, this might be true, but it wouldn't believe me, because I clearly don't have any confidence in what I'm actually saying. And at the end of it, if I hadn't undermined my credibility, I managed to undermine it 100% by my absolute terror. And now part of this is, of course, about managing your nerves. And for me, that's a lot about just practice. If I can, going into the venue, practicing in the venue, rehearsing, making sure that there is no stone unturned in terms of the questions I might be asked. I've drafted answers, etc. Preparation for me is the biggest answer to how I deal with the actual nerves. I might do some breathing exercises or some meditation or something like that if I've got time, to be honest. I rarely manage to find time for that. But yeah, I do what I can to quell the nerves. But let's be honest, for a lot of us, we're going in there feeling nervous anyway. And it's just about the courage of saying, you know what, I'm doing this despite feeling nervous, but recognizing my nerves, I'm going to look at how they then come across to my audience, and I'm going to think specifically about what are the things I do that make me look nervous and undermine how I look in terms of my confidence. And what I can do then to make sure that I on purpose hold my hands here, I on purpose lower my shoulders to look more relaxed, I open my body language, I slow down my pace, I add in pauses, I'm conscious of those ers and ums, and for me just slowing down is a key thing that enables me to do the multitasking of, I started speeding up again, I added in a bunch of ers and ums, I'm walking from one side of the stage to the other, and I'm remembering that I'm going to speak in a slow and considered way, and I'm going to stand still, unlike what I did on the other side of the stage. So you're paying attention to this as you go. We can do this, and it's surprising what a difference it makes. Try it out. If it's not too embarrassing, set up your phone somewhere, hit record, and next time you're doing a lecture, play it back to yourself and analyse your verbal tics, your hand tics, your feet tics, the things that you do without realising it that actually undermine what you're saying. And think about how you can not just be authoritative because you've got evidence, not just be passionate because you care, but convey that in a measured way that actually shows people that you deeply care and that they should indeed be listening to you and therefore thinking about what they might do to act on what you have said.